to welcome several industry leaders in this field. Specifically, we're discussing fintech and positive steps towards financial inclusion. This will be the final panel for this day. Technological innovation is transforming the access and flow of capital between people and across continents. Allow me to welcome my fellow panelists before we introduce together the topic and hopefully get you on your way home. Please welcome Namir Khan, who's the chairman of the MENA Fintech Association, bringing us a lot of insight in his industry and a wealth of experience in the fintech sector. Namir Khan will be one of the panelists on this topic. Also welcome Walid Hassouna, who's the CEO of NBFI Platform, CEO of YAO and head of debt capital markets at EFG Hermes. We'll get a mic over to you. We'll get a microphone over as well. Are you mic'd? Not yet? All right, we'll get a microphone over to you. Welcome. Please welcome as well Khalid Khalifa, who's the Senior Advisor and Representative to the GCC for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And welcome Salman Jafari, who's the Chief Business Development Officer at the Dubai International Financial Center Authority. Give you a couple of minutes to get mic'd up. So when it comes to fintech, we've heard a lot of challenges in your industries, in your respective companies and banks and corporations. We've also heard a lot of innovative solutions as well in this sector. It was one of the sectors that was hit hard and fast, where consumers' demands have changed and increased. Everybody wanted their services faster and remotely and in a safer manner as well. So hopefully we'll be able to discuss some of these solutions that you oversaw. Also expanding access to previously underbanked maybe and unbanked customers is the key to uplifting many communities across the region and the world. Allow me to start with you, Walid. You have overseen several innovative initiatives. Can we start with maybe some of the challenges, the top challenges that you have maybe come across and those that concern you the most in this coming year, before we get into initiatives and innovations and solutions?
Okay, thank you very much for this introduction. So basically, I would like to cover the Egyptian market, where we are very active when it comes to fintech. EFG has established its own accelerator in 2017. We were lucky enough to partner with the Ministry of International Cooperation at the time to introduce the first fintech accelerator the Egyptian market. And this was done because we understood the challenges in this market early on, especially with the infrastructure and the smartphone penetration and the level of underbanked and unbanked customer level. Luckily enough, in early 2016, we were able to acquire the biggest microfinance player in the Egyptian market, Tanmaya, and they had more than 400,000 active borrowers and customers for their business. And we tried to digitize the process as much as we can successfully. We were able to digitize most of the process by 2018, 2019, and even in 2020. And now in 2021, most of our customers are using either digital wallets or cards for their payment and for their disbursement. On the other hand, we launched Value in December 2017, which was the first buy now, pay later in the region, not only in Egypt. And we have used an app for this purpose The app was the first time to be introduced to the market. Everyone was used to documentation and paperwork. We were able to provide an instant approval to our customers to use Value app in their checkout, whether online or offline, without the need of issuing any cards. The challenges at this time was basically...
Because we'd love to get into the challenges, but more specifically the skepticism that we hear of in the Egyptian market and several markets across this region when it comes to cashless transactions and electronic transactions. What sort of incentives maybe do you offer customers to improve this operation?
The first thing that we have offered our customers is the instant approval and instant checkout. So if you compare this to a cash payment or a cash loan, customers will have to go and withdraw the cash and go and pay for the products and services they want. Or even if they want to issue a credit card, the plastic would take 10 to 15 days to be issued. So we provided everything seamlessly on an app, so customers in less than 20 minutes could have a limit to shop from any retailer or online provider that we are working with no need of activation or issuing of that, and still in a very safe and secure manner, because this is placed on their own mobile phone that was binded to the product through a binding process and a one-time password sent to
Would you like to answer that?
I'm sorry.
They want you to. I'm just joking. I know it's the end of the day, so don't worry. Okay, I'm going to take some of the points you have mentioned, but I'd like to maybe hear a little bit more from Namir about MFTA. It's been around for maybe a few years now, and it's been instrumental in driving this positive change when it comes to fintech. Can you tell us a little bit more about the journey of MFTA, working with regulators, fintechs, and banks in the region, and how does this maybe journey tie up to your goal to further bring digitization to the financial sector?
Sure. So basically, we started off a couple of years before, and the Minister of State basically played a very critical role to enable MFTA. Coming right now, what we're basically looking into when we're talking about our journey with working with the regulators has been, I would say, really, it's been a journey that has only been upwards, and thanks to the regulators and the way they have been progressing, which is more towards understanding that the innovators and the policy makers, they need to be bridged. And the bridging needs to be done with the openness that comes in from the people who are sitting and the policy makers, be that on the offshore regulators or be that the mainland regulators.
I keep hearing about this gap, and it's not just the financial sector, it's so many industries keep telling me that there is a wide gap between both, and I don't know the solution.
So
I'm sure you do.
One of the reasons I would say the gap is blurring is with the rise of the fintech sector, largely, that you would see, right? As the fintech sector is basically growing, that's a sentiment that you can see is only coming in through the openness of the regulators, who are actually welcoming new innovators and new fintechs to come in and actually make life a lot more easier when it comes to financial services. So that gap is definitely decreasing, and that is more to do with the opportunity that we see as policy, not me, but of course the regulators see that the opportunity that is there economically as well for any state that basically enables more financial services innovation coming in. So certainly that bridge is has been decreased substantially, but there's a long way to go.
Let me move on now to, we're still in the same topic, but an important factor when it comes to UNHCR, which is improving livelihoods through economic and financial inclusion. And that's a key component of achieving protection and long-term solution for the refugee population. How is UNHCR addressing the financial inclusion? And how would you make sure their access to basic banking requirements in this digital age is being met?
Well, first, thank you. It's a pleasure to be in this gathering as a humanitarian organization. Probably we are the only humanitarian organization in the event. UNHCR, as you know, caters for 82 million people worldwide who are forcibly displaced. Those are people who were forced to flee because of persecution or other reasons and moved either within their own countries or abroad. Many of those needed to escape without any papers, without any documents, and they are residing either in their own countries in different places within their own countries or outside, and they're hosted by countries that are already facing development issues. Out of that total, 85% live in developing countries who are facing digitization issues. They are facing issues related to the financial gap between the rich and the poor. So by default, people who are coming from outside suffering from humanitarian problems will not be a privileged group in the community. There is an understanding gap, so I'm adding another gap to the discussion here, within the financial sector about displacement. When you hear about refugees, you imagine that this is something temporary and short-term. But our statistics tell us that the average period of displacement is at least 20 years. So you are talking about people who are forced to stay in a displacement situation in a camp or in an urban area in disprivileged areas usually for 20 years. Some of those situations have reached 40 years, like in Afghanistan, for example. Afghani refugees who are living in Pakistan and Iran are living there now for 40 years. We are trying to bridge the gap through discussions with the fintech sector, with the finance sector, and with local regulators to make sure that displaced people are not excluded, that they have access to digital banking, for example, to digital wallets, and that they can continue living like normal, because they have to. You are talking about decades, so people need to continue living as if they are living in their own countries.
Unfortunately, it's certainly not been temporary for many refugees, considering we're in no shortage of crisis in this part of the world. I will stay within the innovation sub-headline and go to you, Salman. How has the setup of the DIFC Innovation Hub fostered new innovative ideas, specifically this unprecedented rise that we are seeing in startups and new digital ideas? And how maybe would this drive, in your opinion, financial inclusion and representation?
Thank you. So, is my mic on? Yeah, that's great.
Let's check.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So let me try and answer the question and kind of thread the discussions from Walid, Namir, and Khalid. Let's start backwards from what we do. We exist for one major purpose, which is to drive economic growth for Dubai and the region. And to do that, you have to solve a number of problems, many of which are global in nature, and some are specific to the region. Now, Khalid's point, example of refugees, is a very interesting one, because it's an example of where technology has a particular advantage. You can deploy, if done right, financial services at scale at very low cost to a large number of people who may not have had traditional access to, let's say, branches or traditional banking. That's the kind of endeavor that we are in the midst of doing. So at the DIFC, for example, we've been around for 17 or 18 years, and what we did really well was to aggregate capital and talent successfully in financial services, created jobs, created growth. Financial services changed, so we had to adapt, and we created an ecosystem in fintech. And doing that, as the panel will attest to, and Namir knows a thing or two about this as well, requires a combination of regulatory change, policy development, and partnership with the private sector. So the fact that you have 4 individuals here from the private sector, multilaterals, trade organizations, and the government is a really good example of how to do this. Innovation Hub, to answer your question directly, is a very good example of how you build ecosystems. And ecosystems, often it's overused, underappreciated.
Specifically also, sorry to interrupt you, because many of the startup ideas from the youth in this region have, as you said, used technology to actually serve some of the refugee issues. So the hub is one of the solutions or one of the tools that's facilitating these solutions back to, so almost connecting the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So the hub aggregates now, we have almost 500 innovation companies. And the key message there is not that, of course, we're very proud of that scale, but there's 2 or 3 key observations. Number one, a significant number of them are from the region. And so what that does is it harnesses regional talent. Number 2, it addresses a whole bunch of issues in unique ways. For example, there's companies that do digital payments. There are many companies that do buy now, pay later. There are companies that provide financial services, that provide digital wealth management. So in doing so, we are able to innovate in financial services, and a key piece of that is inclusion, particularly when it comes to payments, when it comes to KYC, when it comes to identity. And the Innovation Hub is a great example of how we've done that successfully in the DIFC.
Okay, allow me to please go back with you, Walid, a little bit to Egypt. And you've touched on a little bit on this issue, but according to some of the latest numbers, it says that more than 75% of those surveyed in Egypt are still unbanked. What initiatives and investments maybe has EFG made to foster fintech startups that have embarked upon this journey, and how are you working with other stakeholders to improve this situation, maybe decrease this percentage?
Okay, so we have done this through various verticals. The problem in Egypt is actually bigger than 75% who are unbanked, because also you need to define what's unbanked. Unbanked are people who doesn't have a current or saving account with a bank, or people who fail to get access to financing through the bank. And the 75% would represent people who doesn't have any account with banks. If you go deeper than that and look at people who fail to receive any kind of financing from financial institutions, including banks, I think the figure is going to reach most 90%.
90.
So EFG has had different verticals on how they wanted, how we wanted to attract the unbanked segment. And frankly speaking, the most interesting part for most of the unbanked segment would be the ability to access financing solutions where they need the most. And that's why we have, in our first vertical, we have built a number of companies like Tanmeya and Value who are able to underwrite unbanked for credit facilities at very decent margins for them. So we're able to attract them, and we want to attract them on a very fast pace, and this is where the use of technology was very important. So on Tanmeya, our underwriting turnaround time is 24 hours. On Value, our underwriting turnaround time is around 5 minutes. And the reason, and we think this is one of the most important factors.
You attract them with speed. You've been dangling the speed carrot.
We attract them with speed, and we attract them also with efficiency. On the other, this is one vertical that we had. The second vertical was our investment in payments. So we wanted also to provide payment solutions for e-commerce and social e-commerce sellers. And to do that, we have invested in a JV with PayTabs to provide the Egyptian market with very simple, seamless solutions for sellers to have access to different ways of payment, including not only debit cards and credit cards, because this will fit more with the banked customers, but also digital wallets and other means of consumer finance and buy now, pay later. On the third vertical, we have concentrated on investing in companies that are catering for the unbanked. And we have invested in more than 30 different companies. Our investments are always a very small percentage. We want to make sure that everyone, that the founders...
Spread it out.
And we want to, we want to have more reach, and on the other hand, we don't want to act as a big minority shareholder and affects the sustainability of the product, and we want to make sure founders are well rewarded for their business. We also provided them with our own sandbox inside EFG to try their models and to try their solutions. So we invested heavily in more than 30 companies under our accelerator and directly through EFG in companies that are targeting the unbanked segment. And one of the most important parts of attracting the unbanked segment would be B2B e-commerce, for example. So we invested in a couple of companies that are very big in B2B e-commerce. And on the other hand, we also invested in companies that onboards SME employees for different services like bank loans, like payroll loans and things like that. Also, we invested into companies that provide payday loans again, very important for us to provide this at very decent margins. So we make sure that the customers are getting the right product at the right price, and they're getting the privilege of the right price and the speed. So we invested also in companies that are in payday loans, whether for employees or even for freelancers or casual employees. So, and this helped us through the 3 verticals to attract and access most of the unbanked customers in our geography. And it helped us growing our portfolio compared to other companies in the same field, because our main focus was always to get the underbanked and unbanked customers into the ecosystem of EFG Hermes, whether through companies like Value and Tanmaya that we own like 100% right now, or companies that we invest in via JV like PayTabs, or even companies that we own 1 to 5% of under our accelerator. And of course, we provide follow-on funding. We provide investment banking services for those companies, and we help them on their next steps and their fundraising.
Namir, I'd like to get your insight on some of the countries in our region that are currently lagging behind on offering a proper framework or infrastructure, a healthy infrastructure to foster fintech innovations. Why is this the case? What are the top challenges that are standing in their way, and is there a way the top challenges can be mitigated?
So I'll be very, am I audible?
Not yet.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Yeah, great. So I'll try to be very crisp in terms of and short in terms of my answer, in terms of, defining what's the typical issue that we would face. The precedent is set by countries such as UAE itself, which has basically led to other countries in the region to embark upon the same journey. What are those key ingredients? Which includes key infrastructure that is basically conducive for future innovations and future projects that are going to be launched itself over here in this part of the world. Secondly, not every single country in the region would be able to provide that level of infrastructure. Second is the talent piece. Again, this place where we're sitting in is basically a hub where you are able to attract different talents and different pool of talents from different places all over the world. Third, access to capital. Again, a lot of countries would not have that significant level of access to capital the way UAE has been able to provide that access to capital. And lastly, I would like to highlight the piece in terms of infrastructure that is an environment that enables policy making. Again, I come to the part of the policy making, it's very critical and essential. Policy making that basically ensures that the solutions for the current and the future are basically incubated properly to ensure that they get significant scale and mileage ahead. So I do feel that apart from a few countries, UAE is certainly leading that space. Apart from a few other countries in the region, not many other countries currently possess all of these key ingredients, which certainly is the gap that I foresee.
Right, we're a bit short on time, so the final 2 questions, I'm going to address it to Khalid and Salman. Khalid, the number of the refugee population in the past decade, you're already nodding your head, has doubled. How would you have been and so should have been the funding for their financial requirements as well. How is UNHCR partnering with the necessary financial institutions to alleviate such need and to increase maybe touch points for collecting donations?
Very good question. I just want to put things in perspective why the world should think more about people in displacement. We are talking about 1% of the world population. And this 1%, so I would like to pick from my colleagues' points, they are not bankable, they're unbankable, let alone creditable. They do not have access at all to credit. And we are approaching the issue from different angles. We need to continue our discussion with the regulators who sometimes do not understand that a refugee cannot afford the same type of documents you expect from a person who is a national of that country. If you mentioned this large proportion of the Egyptian population who are not banked, you can imagine if you apply that to the refugees who are living in Egypt, for example, who do not have passports, who cannot sometimes prove their identity. We in UNHCR introduced the iris scanning system to increase the inclusion of refugees in the banking sector. And I am glad to give a couple of examples. Through discussions with the central bank in Jordan, during the COVID, the peak of the COVID pandemic, the number of refugees who had access to banking services in Jordan doubled. That's 100% increase because the government allowed them to access digital services online. In Lebanon, and we all know about the economic situation in Lebanon, we conducted a survey that proved that every dollar that is given to a refugee in cash in Lebanon contributed 2.1% to the GDP. So refugees are not really a burden. We applied that to Uganda, and our studies confirmed that the value a bank, for example, generates from an account that is opened by a refugee or a displaced person generates the same revenue for the financial institution like any low-income citizen of that country. We are partnering with Fintech organizations. We are in discussions with Namir and his team. We will be launching an exciting new initiative, hopefully by the end of the year. And we are trying to explore innovative financing initiatives like Islamic philanthropy. For example, UNHCR now is the lead agency in collecting zakat for refugees. If you Google the word zakat, the first or second entry you get is the zakat fund for refugees. And we are very proud of that. We are exploring other venues of Islamic philanthropy like Awqaf and Sukuk and so on. And we launched an application which I encourage everybody to
Nothing. We've overextended our welcome at the DEC, but go ahead, I'll let you conclude.
20 seconds. Yes. The application is called Give Zakat, and it is available on Androids and on iOS. It can calculate your zakat, and you can donate to whichever situation you want using your iPhone. Thank you.
All right, I know it's a very complicated and a multi-layered topic that cannot be concluded in the time that we have. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your valuable insights. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I would like to conclude this session, also to conclude this day and this innovative and the first of its kind, the Forbes Middle East Sustainable Innovation Summit 2021. I invite you, please, for your panel photo before we conclude the day. It's been my pleasure, and on behalf of the Forbes Middle East family, I thank you so much for making it throughout the day and listening to the insights and following us on social media as well as we bring you the latest news and updates specifically on sustainability sector, which is the main sub-headline of Expo for this year. Thank you so much, and hopefully see you in the next year. Thank you.